Welcome to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and we're again talking with Tom Murphy, who is a disc jockey on Kissin' the 90 Wonderful in Portland, as well as KGR 95 in Seattle. He was also in Los Angeles, Chicago, Cleveland. And Tom, tell us about how you got the moniker World Famous.
I made it up.
So nobody wrote and said, hey, you're world famous, dude.
No, someone wrote said, hey, butthead, no, you're world famous. How come I never heard of you? I just made it up. It was kind of a, sometimes, there's a bolt of lightning and, inspiration or something, and that was just kind of my, I don't know why. I thought I'm the famous Tom Murphy. I did that in Spokane, and then when I went to Seattle, I said, well, famous, any weenie can be famous. World famous, however, And I was always amazed because it stuck. Because, to me it was so absurd, And I remember Lou Witz didn't want to do world famous. I said, trust me, Lou, this'll work. And all of a sudden, all the billboards and then the bus backs and everything in town, world famous Tom Murphy mornings, super jock Larry Lou Jack afternoons, And that was so. It just, I don't know that I ever used it at KISS. I think by that time, in fact, I don't think I ever did. I just sort of went into KISS FM and tried to just stay low and stay away from Kent Burkhardt. And
who's Kent Burkhardt?
He was a self-ascribed genius who had Burkhardt Abrams programming and was kind of an idiot, But he got that's kind of a fun story about. This is where the kid in the back seat story comes from. You know that one, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, Kent Burkhardt was hired by John Bayless to come out and consult. So Kent Burkhardt was the one who they had WTKU, I think, or KTU, whatever the hell it was in New York, that had well over 4 listeners or something. And so Burkhardt, just grabbed his last arrow in the quiver was, I know, we'll go disco. Well, going disco in New York was fine, People like discos in New York. People in L.A. couldn't give a damn, And so he talked John Bayless into going disco with KISS, and I immediately put in a request to be moved over onto the AM because at that point KISS FM was no really any bigger, I suppose, than KISS AM was. It didn't have Rick Dees and all the accompanying success that they did with Wally and everybody, but. So anyway, he went disco, and it was just crazy. It didn't make any sense at all. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. But so the disco thing was awful, and they finally, after I don't know how, they didn't do it a real long time, but they got Rick Dees in there in the morning, and Don Benson was the PD, and Wally Clark was the manager, and they just turned that thing around in about 30 seconds, and it became KISS FM, which was...
Well, I remember reading, was about a week ago, Benny Martinez passed away. And
I saw that. I've got to get online and, say something about Benny. Benny was a nice guy.
He was, yeah. He brought me under his wing when I interned at Oldies 93, and I did a tribute to him online on the podcast here. But Benny was at K West 106, and he and China Smith were the only 2 carryovers from the rock format into Top 40 that was programmed by Chuck Martin. And they said that Chuck Martin had all the tools, the great lineup, but the problem was that management pretty much backed out on its promises. That they said one thing, did another, and so pretty much that paved the way for KISS FM to become number 1 was because K West's management basically said one thing, did another, and then Chuck Martin never did program a station again after that, which was kind of surprising. He just got kind of disillusioned with it, which I don't blame him. I mean, after having what happened with KHJ going from Top 40 that was making a comeback to country, I think it's kind of funny.
That was a mess, wasn't it?
I think it's kind of funny the general manager who did that was Neil Rockoff. had the perfect name because he took the rock off and put on country.
Yeah, yeah. I ran into Chuck Martin at Paul Freeman's retirement party, and I had known the name obviously, but he and I got a good hour visiting. And he had, we were like bookends of Kissin'. He was the last PD at Kissin' before the FCC threw him off the air. And, of course, I was one of the first DJs on Kissin' when they first came on, And, but he seemed like a really nice guy. Interesting, I think he was really very interested in the stories that I had from the beginning of Kissin', of course, because I was the only one around that had been there at that point,
Yeah, definitely. The in Seattle, how did you, I guess, get lured to Los Angeles with KRLA from KJR?
Dick Saint.
Mm-hmm.
I had always wanted to work in L.A., and two reasons. One, the first time I ever visited L.A. in 1960 when I was on vacation from Kissin', I loved it. L.A., it was cool, And my plan was, not that I would have achieved the success that like Bob Crane did, being on the radio and then, getting Hogan's Heroes and all that success. But I thought if I could make a living on the radio, I could maybe get into some acting work, which wasn't that goofy an idea really at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I liked L.A. And plus, people that I had worked with. Don was now in L.A. Dick Saint, and so Dick Saint called me and offered me the morning show on KRLA. And I had been kind of, sending tapes over the years, and no response. And so I thought, this is my shot. I better take it. And so I did. Well, it was a mistake. KRLA was a real snake pit, and Dick left because he couldn't stand it, and the only friend I had two friends there, Johnny Darren and Jay Stevens,
mm-hmm.
but Shadow Stevens became the PD, and he just wanted to turn AM KRLA into FM KRLA, and he got rid of me, he got rid of Jay Stevens, truly one of the best jocks in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Diamond got blown out of there, And he brought in B. Mitch Reed and some other people that I didn't know because I went back to Seattle. But that was kind of too bad because I'd wanted to work in L.A. and I got the job and it just turned to crap almost immediately. So what are you going to do? And
the station was coming on strong.
We were doing very well. Yeah, we hadn't knocked KHJ off the block yet, of course, mm-hmm. But Dick had a good format. Jay was great at music. He was the music director.
Wow.
And we had Shadow Stevens in the afternoon. I mean, he ended up firing me, but he was still a hell of a good jock, And
in fact,
Dave Diamond doing evenings. Had Lee Baby Sims 9 to midnight. Boy, he didn't get any crazier than him, And he was funny. You ever spend a day with somebody and talk to them and realize you have no idea what they were thinking? That was kind of like Lee Baby, But he had I did the mornings, and then Don Burns followed me, then Jay, then Shadow, then Dave Diamond, then Lee Baby, and Johnny Darren was on the overnighter. God, what a good lineup!
Oh yeah,
that wasn't too shabby, but they just couldn't stand not screwing it up, so they did.
And then, in fact, you replaced Jay Stevens in Morning Drive, from what I remember.
Yes, Jay moved to noon to 3. Jay didn't want to do mornings; he didn't like it. So I mean, that was not a setback as far as he was concerned,
Oh yeah. And plus, he became music director, which added a lot of things to the what could have been a great radio station. And then you moved to back to Seattle after that, right?
Yeah, I went back to Seattle. I didn't go back to KJR, which was kind of unfortunate the way things worked. Long story short, which I'm not going to do, but Pat had replaced me with Scotty Brink, and Scotty Brink didn't like Seattle, which was odd because later on he moved back there and spent years there. I think he might still be. No, he's back here in California somewhere now. But anyway, Scotty didn't work out too well, so they moved the evening guy down into afternoons. And then when the KRLA thing fell apart, Pat wanted me to come back, but he wanted me to come back and do 6 to 10 at night. Well, I tried to explain. I understand why he didn't want to move Norm out of afternoons, but Norm had been in afternoons a couple of months. I'd been doing afternoons for over 2 years, So it didn't make sense not to move me back into the afternoon thing. But Pat kind of thought that he had a hold on me. But the thing was, another friend of mine, Dick Curtis, was managing KOL, and he offered me the afternoons and more money. So being, having the morals of an alley rat, or an alley cat, I guess. I grabbed the afternoon and the money, and I got a car. So hey, Pat. Pat never forgave me. Oh, he claimed he did, but he didn't. But then KOL kind of fell apart, and I had a chance. Then Larry Lujak was the one that talked Lou into bringing me into CFL. So that worked out, and by that time, of course, I'd been in LA, for 15 minutes at KRLA, but WCFL was the hottest station in the country at that point. I mean, they were huge, We're a Billboard Station of the Year, the top 40 Station of the Year that I was on it. So.
Super CFL is what it was called. In fact, Dick Saint even worked there with you eventually.
Yeah, in fact, I helped Dick get the job. Because he was at WLS and wasn't getting along with them, and we had an evening show, and I went to Lou and I said, bring over Dick, he's great. And he did, and...
What was it about Super CFL that made it top-notch above LS at the time?
Well, WLS was kind of stale, Actually, they had a PD, and I ran into him out here. I was doing some work for Ken Draper and Jim Hampton, and he showed up. His name was Mike McCormick, and I had no axe to grind with him or anything, but I do know that they had a manager, Paul Abrams, and Mike McCormick as the PD, and they just kind of turned it into a mess. I don't really know why. And John Rook was the original PD at CFL, and he didn't last because he got into a fight with the old man who was the Chicago Federation of Labor guy, And John didn't realize that in Chicago you didn't screw with the head of the Chicago Federation of Labor, which was CFL, So John was invited to pack his kit bag and get out there to O'Hare and get the hell out of town, But CFL, we were just hot, we had Larry doing afternoons. I was hot in the mornings, we had a good midday guy, Big Ron O'Brien was doing early evenings, So we just and WLS had the misfortune to have these two guys that weren't all that good at running it. It was sort of funny. I remember all of a sudden the rumor was Rick Sklar's in town. Of course, he was the WABC PD. Mm-hmm. And I was either having breakfast or drinks, one of the two, with one of my news guys. And we said, I think we're in deep doo-doo. He said, yeah, have you heard WLS since Rick Sklar's been in town? He turned them around like in an afternoon.
I guess man.
Yeah, if you could handle Big Dan Ingram and all these people on WABC in New York, you could probably take care of WLS's needs too. So anyway, we kind of saw the end of that, and then it was kind of a sad thing in a way. But we all have sad moments, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I had a chance to move over to WMAQ, which was the NBC station in town, and they were doing Hot AC, although R&R hadn't called it Hot AC yet, So, of course, it wasn't officially Hot AC until some nitwit at R&R dubbed it that. But anyway, they had most of the old CFL guys there. They had Jerry G. Bishop in the morning, Joel Sebastian in the afternoon, then moi in the afternoons, and Jim Stagg in the evening. And we were doing really well, and I really loved WMAQ. Great engineers, I had my own little office, and just everything was just great. So, of course, that went into the dumper in about 6 months when they went country and fired everybody, So.
Oh, man.
The Lord works in mysterious ways. I didn't know he had time to worry about WMAQ going country, but apparently he did, I guess.
And then CFL in 1976 went to Beautiful Music, and Lou Jack still had 6 months left on his contract. So here he was doing a comedic morning show on a Beautiful Music or an elevator music station.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was really funny because he told me, of course I talked to him, during this time, and he said they listened to every single break and taped it, just waiting for him to, to slip into Old Uncle Liar, one more time, and say, I hate this. Larry was smart. Larry was making big money, and he had them by the short hairs, as we used to say in the radio business, and so he made damn sure that every one of those breaks was absolutely perfect. What happened was that Marty Greenberg wanted Larry to come back to LS. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of struck a deal with CFL. He said, I'll bring him over to LS and I'll pick up some of his tab here, and that got Larry out of that mess and back onto LS. And of course, he had a great run, another 10 years or something there at LS.
Oh yeah. Now after WMAQ, you went to Cleveland, WIXY 1260.
Yeah.
I'm doing research a while back for this interview. I'm like, I'd never heard of WIXY 1260. Describe that experience.
Well, it was kind of unfortunate because, there was good and bad. WIXY 1260 had been the original top 40 station in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And they were very, very big. They had a lot of big names, but they had kind of fallen into disrepair, and WGAR came on. And they had Imus in the morning before he went to New York, and a couple of other really... they had a guy named Dave Newton in the afternoon who used to call himself Fig Newton, which I always kind of got a kick out of. Come on, Dave, that's really stupid. On the other hand... But... WIXY just was owned by, they'd been bought by Globetrotters. They should have stuck with basketball, And it was just, sometimes, a lot of times the original top 40 station will fall into disrepair and the new one will come along and the old one never comes back. And that was the case with WIXY. They just was not happening,
Oh, yeah. Were there any DJs you worked with that eventually made it more to the big time, or was it kind of like, people most of us have never heard of before, but were pretty good anyway?
Yeah, they're... there were a lot of guys in Seattle who were very good. They just stayed in Seattle. They didn't want to, I always had my eye on L.A., and when Larry, said, come to Chicago, you'll love it. Well, I did. God, Chicago was a great media town. They loved radio people. I got there and I'm in 3 newspapers with a big interview. So
wow,
that didn't happen when I was at KRLA. But Gary Owens said it best one time. He said L.A. is a terrible radio town, and the reason he said that was because. In L.A., a perfect example of L.A. would be in Seattle. We had a KJR basketball team, and we were kind of the stars. We played faculties. Well, here in L.A., they had KISS had a basketball team, and we played the Comedy Store. So I'm going up and down the court with Dave Letterman. No matter what I did, I wasn't as cute as Dave Letterman. So that was always kind of a way of explaining the difference between L.A. and most other markets.
We're talking with world famous Tom Murphy here on the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and next time we'll ask Tom about his being teamed up with the future announcer of Judge Judy.